individual introductions kind of about us or about us?
Normally, if we were in person, that's what we would be doing. And we would be, aware of, what year you are, what your major is, et cetera. So just a couple secs.
Also, just should the judges introduce themselves also?
We'll do that after you introduce yourselves. We'll tell you about us.
Awesome. Well, I'll start off our team. We're the University of St. Thomas undergraduate team from the University of St. Thomas located in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm Ted Freeze. I'm a veteran student actually at the University of St. Thomas. I served 8 years in the Navy and came back, and currently I'm a junior majoring in economics and finance. And yeah, it's been a great experience, and St. Thomas is an awesome place.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
As well. Aubrey?
Yes, my name is Aubrey Geeson. I am a junior as well, and I'm majoring in business administration with a concentration in business law and compliance, as well as getting a minor in public health. And would echo the same words as Ted. Great to be here. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. And Justin?
My name is Justin Stang, and I'm a senior studying finance and economics. And again, I'm honored to be here.
Okay, and Jason, we know you're their advisor, even though you look like you could be one of them. Okay, Evan, good afternoon.
Hi guys, I'm Evan Sibbett. I'm a junior entrepreneurship student, and consulting has actually taken an interest in the back of my mind recently, and so kind of what better circumstances to be working on IBEC.
And last but not least, good afternoon, Maddie.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Maddie Morehouse, and I'm a senior at the University of St. Thomas studying business law and compliance with a minor in Spanish, and I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, and glad that everybody is well and safe, hopefully. Tim, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Tim Mazur. I'm a business ethicist. I've worked in corporate ethics and compliance for 33 years, and I'm currently an integrity and compliance investigator at a pharmaceutical company called Indivior. One thing I'll mention, Ruth, my next case starts right at 2, so no matter what we're doing, I'll pull out by 1:59 Eastern.
Okay, so when it comes to feedback, I'll have you go first so that you can then leave the room virtually, okay? And
thanks.
Hi, I'm retired. Before I did so, I was a consultant on a major project in Texas, the Office of the Future. I started 3 internet companies. One was the first was a software library where you could rent software. The other was Software Exchange, and then the Literary Connection, which connected writers and authors to producers and publishers, and some varied stuff in between.
Okay, and my name is Ruth Kraft. I'm the Uber judge for today. Tim and I have judged this competition for many, many years, and Tim was president of the Compliance Officers Association. Am I correct?
Yeah, a chief operating officer.
COO of the Compliance Officers Association. So I am a lawyer by training. I started my career at a very distinguished New York firm working for the husband of the notorious RBG, who had a tremendous impact on my life, and then became a law professor. I created the business ethics curriculum at New York University and taught at the business law and medical schools. And then I was appointed to the New York Times, and I served as a judge for 14 years. For the last 6 years, I've had my career in reverse. I'm a partner in a New York law firm, and I chair the employment and labor law group. So that's my story, and IBEC is my joy for 18 years. It is an absolute pleasure and an honor to be doing this. So with that, no further ado, you are welcome to begin your presentation.
Ruth, have we heard from Leon?
I don't see Leon at all.
I see Leon.
I see him now. I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Tim. Leon.
Thank you. My name's Leon Goldman. I am currently a fellow at the Hoffman Center for Business Ethics at Bentley University. Before that, I was a chief compliance and privacy officer at an academic medical center in Boston, having started their compliance and their privacy program. I then worked for a while in a for-profit startup as a medical director in a software startup company. But most of my career was actually spent as a general surgeon at an academic medical center and associate professor of surgery.
And we should say for the students who don't know that Mike Hoffman is one of the great luminaries in business ethics. And it was IBEC's intention to honor him in a very significant way this year. And that's been put off until next year because we can't all be together under the most favorable circumstances. But if you ever want to look up Michael Hoffman, you see the full panoply of business ethics over the last at least 30 years. He and Ken Goodpaster at the University of St. Thomas, I think, were the two, probably two of the major luminaries, not including our beloved Tom White. So do you have slides to put up, ladies and gentlemen? Do you want to do that and get that technology up for us? Thanks, Maddie, for doing that. Treasures above, riches below. So you have 30 minutes and please begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're Tommy Consulting, and we're asking the judges today to place yourselves in the shoes of Minnesota State Governor Tim Walz and his cabinet. First, I want to start off by thanking Governor Walz and his cabinet for your time today. Tommy Consulting is proud to represent the University of St. Thomas and the great state of Minnesota. Today, we're going to discuss the potential wide-ranging effects in regards to the proposed copper-nickel mine near the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness in northern Minnesota. We'll address the financial implications, the legal considerations, ethical ramifications encompassing the proposed project. As we begin our journey, we ask you to consider the tremendous value of the untapped resources below, as well as the rich natural splendor above that is the Boundary Waters Canoe Area. Once all aspects have been covered, we'll provide a recommendation on how the state of Minnesota should proceed with the project moving forward. So sit back, relax, put your oar in the water, and enjoy the paddle as Miss Maddie Morehouse pushes us away from shore and we begin our journey.
Thank you so much, Ted. We'll begin by our canoe ride by paddling through the background. We'll look a little bit at the area, the project, and Minnesotan culture. So the question and contention today is, should Twin Metals mining be granted the necessary permits to mine in the Arrowhead region of Minnesota? Let's start off by taking a look at the area. This is the Arrowhead region and the Boundary Waters Canoe area, the area in which the proposed project is being taken place. Bordered by Canada and Lake Superior, within the Superior National Forest, we find the Boundary Waters Canoe area, highlighted in purple for your viewing. This area is a 1.1 million wilderness preserve. It is larger than Yellowstone National Park. Preservation began for this area in the early 1900s with the BWCA Act ending in 1978. It is 150 miles along the border of Canada and the United States. And as you can see, there are several nods to mining on the map, including the historic iron mining range of Minnesota. The Boundary Waters Canoe area is home to many types of recreation. There are 1,200 different canoe routes, camping, hiking, fishing. It is the most visited wilderness in the United States. Here you can find enjoyment for all generations, lasting memories for families all over the country, particularly Minnesotans. Now, my family is an example. In the bottom middle, you can see a photo of my brother from my family's trip to the Boundary Waters in 2011. The BWCA is a huge part of Minnesotan culture, but so is mining. Mining is an identity in northern Minnesota. In 1967, the last underground mine in the Arrowhead region closed. And by 1977, the Minnesota Natural Department of Resources estimated 4.4 million tons of iron ore in the Boundary Waters area. Today's estimate is 7 billion tons. By 1979, the mining industry in Minnesota reached its pinnacle at 16,000 miners working on the Minnesotan Iron Range. Now, northeastern Minnesota is one of the largest undeveloped mineral deposits in the world. Now, that 7 billion tons of copper, nickel, and precious metals have been there for millions of years, and we've known about them for more than 60. Here we have the second largest copper deposit in the world at 34% of the US resource. We have the third largest nickel deposit in the world at 95% of the US resource, and the second largest platinum group metals deposit at 75% of the US resource. So decades of recreation are in this area, but there's contending for the treasures above, but we also have significant profit in the treasures below. So let's talk a little bit about the project. The project is a proposed copper, nickel, and precious metals mine with a 25-year duration. Twin Metals mining site is roughly 6 miles away from the BWCA area. So while it's not within the BWCA area, the effects may likely be felt by terms of water contamination. Now let's talk a little bit about involvement. Antofagasta Minerals was founded in 1979 as a Chilean public limited corporation headquartered in London. It is one of the top 10 copper producers in the entire world. Twin Metals is a US-based limited liability corporation based in Minnesota. In 2010, it was founded, and by 2015, it was wholly owned by Antofagasta Minerals. And in 2013, it announced this project in the Arrowhead region of Minnesota. Now, there are 2 different types of mining that have been proposed for this project: open pit mining versus dry stacking mining. Now, the difference between these two really lies in what's done with the tailings. And the tailings are defined as the kind of leftovers after separating the economic fraction of the ore from the uneconomic fraction of the ore. So let's start with talking a little bit about open pit. Here we have an example of an open pit mine in Bingham County, Utah. An open pit mine is the most common type of industrial mine. Now, this type of mining creates huge permanent scars on the landscape. Because the ore extracted from today's mine is extremely low grade, they generate a huge amount of waste. In fact, the average open pit mine generates 20 tons of waste by the end of their mining, and the tailings are pumped into a nearby waste pond. Now, the dry stacking method, by contrast, is supposed to be a more sustainable method of mining. In 2019, Twin Metals announced that it would use this dry stacking method opposed to the open pit mining. An example of this type of mine is La Coipa mine in Chile. This process has been compared to a French press coffee maker. Crushed waste rock and water created by the mining process will be pressed and dried to remove most of that moisture. That material will then be compacted and stored into piles covered by native soil and vegetation. A gravity drainage system will collect any moisture that remains, according to Twin Metals, and all that leftover water will then be recycled into the processing plant. Now, Twin Metals is planning to store its mine waste on site within the watershed of the BWCA instead of putting it into the watershed of Lake Superior. Now, dry stacking is a better method, but it's not perfect. The method is more likely to succeed in dry climates. Minnesota has a yearly average humidity of 71%. The dry stacking method has been used in 4 different areas that have similar climates to Minnesota, like Canada and Alaska, and this resulted in actually higher amounts of lead in the water. In moisture-filled climates like Minnesota, dry stacking is not the most favorable method of mining. And so we have 2 competing cultures in Minnesota: mining, the dignity of their work, and this profitable endeavor, and the Boundary Waters Canoe area wilderness and the recreation that continues with that.
All right, thank you for getting us started, Maddie. Now, let us wade in and look at the financial implications that surround the plan. For over 130 years, Minnesota's mining industry has fueled the economy of northeastern Minnesota. In fact, it is definitely a pillar upon which our great state was built. According to the Iron Mining Association of Minnesota, the iron mines in northeastern Minnesota directly contribute $1.8 billion to the economy of Minnesota every year in the form of purchases, wages and benefits, and taxes and royalties. Subsequent business impact induced is responsible for an additional $1.6 billion, which runs the total economic impact north of $3 billion on state and region economies. Construction is expected to contribute an additional $5.2 million to the state economy as well. Benefits of mining this ore include low cost, reliable electricity, as well as the materials necessary to build our homes, schools, hospitals, as well as craft our roads and highways. Not to mention creating a vast amount of direct and indirect jobs for a region with a rich history of mining. Twin Metals estimates the proposed mine would produce about 180 million tons of ore over a 25-year lifespan. Investment in the project to date already exceeds $450 million and is expected to surpass $1.7 billion through completion. If Twin Metals is granted the permits, they expect to directly employ 650 people for mining operation and another 1,400 non-mining jobs in industries such as equipment suppliers, manufacturing, retail, and healthcare. all which benefit the community immensely. And although these mining jobs are critical to the economy of the Arrowhead, just as critical is the recreational employment that is created by tourism and hospitality. And in an economic lens, we see these cultures clash yet again. Along with the mining, recreation and hospitality are two of the biggest sectors within the Arrowhead economy. Employment in these sectors grew 1.4% per year from 2012 to 2016. Furthermore, employment in the recreation and hospitality industries surpassed 13,000 in 2016 alone in the area. In fact, it was estimated that the Boundary Waters Canoe area wilderness visits from out-of-region visitors alone support nearly 900 direct jobs each year, a number that continues to grow. So, Governor, if disaster were to ensue, employment in these sectors would be permanently damaged, and that is frankly a risk we are not willing to take. So the question we must pose ourselves today is, will the economy of the Arrowhead region be better off with or without the proposed mine? The answer begs us to review a recent study of boom-bust economies, in which they are associated with resource extraction. To get a clear sense of how this region will experience this boom-bust, we turn our attention toward a study conducted at Harvard University in August of 2018. The study focuses on the economic effects of this ethical issue while pitting approval against operation in the case of withdrawal. But for our argument's sake, we chose to look at the hypothetical approval and operation of the proposed mine and the effects it would have on the region's economy in the form of employment and income. 72 employment and income paths resulted, and the findings are a bit disturbing. Initially, mining is economically beneficial because of new mining jobs, income produced from these jobs, and their spillover to the local economy. However, over time, the net effect of these new mining jobs will erode. It will impact the recreation industry in a negative economic sense. The proposed mine development would lead to boom-bust cycles that are typical of resource extraction economies. And as you can see from the graph, direct and indirect employment will begin to trend downward after just year 2, without any hope for recovery. The income paths graph focused on the effects within the mining and recreation industry alone, while taking into consideration income and in-migration as it relates. Governor, people desire to live in this region, but they also deserve to inherit lands that are not contaminated forever. 89% of the income cases shown show downturn in an economic sense as a result of mining near these lands. The benefits of mining are vastly outweighed by the income costs on recreation and in-migration. The inherent riskiness of a project of this magnitude leaves us treading through very uncertain waters. If copper nickel mining is commenced near the Boundary Waters Canoe area, there would likely be an initial but temporary net growth in both employment and income associated. However, over time, the economic benefits of mining would be heavily outweighed by the negative impact induced upon the recreational industry. Mining would in turn lead to this boom-bust cycle that we talked about, in which the region is much worse off economically. There is also considerable uncertainty about the timing and magnitude of a project of this sort, and the data that is specifically applicable to the region. A Minnesotan has an unmatched sense of pride in their home. From the snowmobile trails that line our rivers to the expansive wilderness up north, what a land we are blessed to call our home. Governor Walz, this place is in immediate danger. The region will be much better off financially without the plan, and therefore, we recommend you consider taking away the permits for Twin Meadows Mine.
Thanks, Evan. So let's paddle right along and take a look at some of the legal aspects of this case. We'll start by looking at the 3 phases of permitting. Now, before any company starts mining, they have to go through each of these 3 phases in order to legally mine. We'll start by taking a look at the first phase. In this phase, companies conduct environmental baseline studies, and the phase ends with the submission of a formal mining plan to both state and federal agencies. In the second phase, the agencies can take over and conduct further environmental testing in an effort to mitigate potential damages. If the agencies choose to approve the project, the company will then begin actually applying for permits. Currently, Twin Metals project is in this phase as they submitted their formal plan in December of last year. In the final step, each agency involved will focus on their own specific type of permit. For example, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency will focus on permits regulating air quality. Now, before we move forward, let's take a step back and look at the government's role in protecting boundary waters. Historically, legislation has been a tool to prevent contamination by mining. In 1964, the Wilderness Act was passed to restrict logging and mining in pristine wilderness areas like the boundary waters. The act emphasizes the duty of government to leave wilderness intact for future use. Twin Metals' proposed mine sits just a few miles from the wilderness, and with the high probability of pollution, this is a huge risk. The damage to fish, wildlife, and human health would be irreversible, and liability for this level of damage should not be taken lightly. More recently, opponents to Twin Metals' proposed plan are actively using legislation to stop companies from mining near the boundary waters. Minnesotan Congresswoman Betty McCollum has introduced the Boundary Waters Wilderness Protection and Pollution Prevention Act in the U.S. House of Representatives. The act seeks to prevent companies like Twin Metals from sulfide or copper mining. Rep. McCollum states that the wilderness is intact because of more than a century of protections and emphasizes legislative duty to continue this legacy. Beyond the irreversible damage to the environment and wildlife, Twin Metals' proposed project poses a financial threat to our Minnesotans. Because Twin Metals is a wholly owned subsidiary of parent company Antofagasta, it acts as its own legal entity, which means Minnesota and the US government would be barred from pursuing financial recovery in the event of damage. Which means if Twin Metals goes bankrupt and Antofagasta is legally untouchable, the only people left to bear the burden of financial restoration would be Minnesotan taxpayers. Governor Walz, you have the opportunity to join in the legislative movement to restrict mining in the boundary waters. As the highest executive in Minnesota, you have the ability to deauthorize state agencies from issuing further permits. We recommend that you restrict state agencies from moving forward in the permitting process and instead pursue a public-private partnership in support of the current mining community.
Thanks, Aubrey. Let's roll on and wade into the ethical considerations of the decision. To do so, I will be conducting the analysis through the 4 avenues framework, which means looking at the case of stakeholders through the following 4 avenues. First, the rights, which considers fairness and protecting liberties. Next, duties, which looks at responsibilities, loyalties, and obligations. Interests means maximizing the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And finally, character, which analyzes the problem through the actions of the stakeholders. Each avenue provides value to the ethical analysis, but I will factor the character section most in our recommendation. Each of the 4 avenues will be applied to the 2 major stakeholders. First, the company involved, Twin Metals, and next, society as a whole, which can be differentiated between the effects on the environment and on the community around the Arrowhead region. With this strategy in mind, I will attempt to address the following 2 questions. Is society better off from this project? And can you trust Twin Metals to properly perform the project? As I explained before, the rights avenue is about fairness. Twin Metals has the right to go through the proper permitting process to begin conducting business, as well as the right to the profits related to that business conducted. However, we would argue that the land also has a right, and that right is to remain untainted because of the numerous environmental acts previously mentioned. In addition, the Minnesota Ojibwe tribe were ceded the territory in the Treaty of 1854 to use for hunting and fishing. Others using the BWC have the right to enjoy nature and access their flourishing through the experience of the wilderness. Duties are the responsibilities related to the stakeholders. Twin Metals has the ethical duty to care for the environment it occupies, pursue sustainability, and clean up potential messes it creates through its mining operations. We as a society have a duty to maintain the environment, as well as to preserve the heritage, community, and culture of the Arrowhead region, all of which could be disrupted by the mining. The interest avenue regards maximizing benefits and minimizing costs. Twin Metals, like all corporations, has the interest to maximize the value for its investors. Meanwhile, it is in the interests of society to maintain the environment, but there are also financial interests to the surrounding community. The people of the Arrowhead region have the interest of pursuing potential economic growth while minimizing the possibility of the boom-bust cycle. On the other hand, as twin metal sites, it is in the world's interest to increase its copper and nickel supply, which are in part used to create batteries and other components for green energy. Based on the first three avenues, the numerous conflicts between twin metals and society indicate that society is not better off with the mining project. While the other avenues have merit, the crux of our argument rests on the character avenue, which analyzes the integrity of the stakeholders, something which twin metals owner Antofagasta lacks. In the past, Antofagasta has been linked to bribery and corruption in the Chilean government. The company paid off members of their parliament for favorable voting, reports, and getting away with dumping potentially contaminated waste over the border into Argentina, which caused acid mine drainage around the site. At another mining site in Chile, mining pollutants such as mercury and manganese have been found at levels between 26 and 1,000% above that which is permitted. These are just a few examples in Antofagasta's long tradition of corruption and causing environmental damage. Can they be trusted to do better this time? Or if they do mistakes, will they pay for them? Take a look at the images on the screen. Antofagasta has caused much civil and environmental damage in Chile, and now they're in Minnesota. The BWCA provides society with the virtues of managing such precious land and resources, as well as offering a space for human self-actualization. All of what you see in this picture, the majestic beauty of an untouched wilderness, as well as what it has to offer to humanity, could be destroyed from this one mining project. So Governor Walz, Cabinet, is society better off? Based on the risk to the environment, we say no. And can you trust Antofagasta? Based on their past poor character, we again say no. And therefore, we recommend the denial of their proposed mine.
Wow, what a beautiful journey that was. As we come ashore, let us review the topics covered. Financially, based on economic modeling associated with resource extraction, the Arrowhead region of Minnesota will experience negative effects associated with boom-bust economy. Thus, the benefits of withdrawal exceed that of approval and operation of the mine. Legally, due to the inherent risk of environmental pollution, this project presents to the Boundary Waters Canoe area the irreversible damage to protected federal lands and the loss of liability for financial recovery. Twin metals should not mine in this location. Ethically, society is better off without the proposed copper nickel mine, and based on Antofagasta's past, they cannot be trusted. Therefore, we recommend the withdrawal of these mining permits. Given these aspects, we can confidently give our final recommendation. Governor Walz, you have the authority to direct state agencies to refuse to process any permits submitted by Antofagasta and Twin Metals Minnesota, and we strongly recommend you do. Instead, the state should pursue a public-private partnership to build renewable energy sources and provide new green jobs in northern Minnesota. This public-private partnership would provide funding in support of large-scale renewable energy building projects and would replace mining jobs with new green energy jobs. The public benefit from the finished product, in this case, renewable energy and a safe environment. And the private sector benefits from job creation and the operating profit. A partnership of this type would support Minnesota's strong mining identity by providing dignified, technical work for the community. It would also validate Minnesota's commitment to clean energy and a sustainable environment, which in turn will support the Boundary Waters tourism industry. This solution is financially, legally, and ethically sound. We urge you to take our recommendation seriously and continue to act in the best interest of Minnesotans. In closing, we'd like to offer you one final thought. In the words of President Theodore Roosevelt, in the United States, we turn our rivers and streams into sewers and dumping grounds. We pollute the air, we destroy forests, and exterminate fishes, birds, and mammals. But at last, it looks as if our people are awakening. Governor Walz, we're asking you to continue this awakening and halt copper nickel mining in the Boundary Waters Canoe area wilderness. With that, we want to thank you, Governor Walz and Cabinet, for your time and open it up to any questions you might have.
Thank you. I have one initial question and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. As governor, obviously I have a limited term in office. You're talking about a project that can go out 25 years, correct? How do we know what mitigation may be available so that we can have the best of all possible worlds and both encourage the economic growth but mitigate the environmental damages, especially if we're looking that far out in the future.
So what I think you're asking here is really about how to best mitigate damages. And in the permitting process, in the second phase that we talked about, the environmental review phase, here there's a lot of different agencies that are involved, both state agencies and federal agencies. And while they're in that process, they look at project alternatives, they look at potential impacts, and they try to weigh all of these before they move forward and approve the project for any permits. So in that phase, they'd be looking at all of the damages and what they can do. And the process itself takes about 5 to 7 years. So they really do spend plenty of time looking at all of the options.
So do we have to make a decision on this now, or can we allow the permitting to go forward and see where the chips fall?
So if the project moves forward in the environmental review phase after all of the science has been verified, the company can begin applying for permits, and applying for permits takes a few years itself, so it won't necessarily be the next day or anything where they start. But as soon as they're able to move forward with having the actual permits, they're really given free rein to start going with their mining, and there's no real stopping it at that point.
If I may, I have actually a couple of questions. Can you comment on, I mean, we talked about remediation, and it would appear that the state of Minnesota is going to bear the brunt of the cost. Can you talk a little bit about over how long a period of time that actually goes, and what's involved in the cost of mitigation beyond just cleaning up the water? Since I presume these are carcinogenic chemicals, and so you not only have cleaning up the site, but you're going to have people getting cancer, you're going to have children dying early, and over, this could go for 100 years. So if you could comment on it.
Yeah, great question. It's hard to give a specific number, so I've looked at different projects that used similar methods of mining, similar types of ore that they were trying to mine for, and it's hard to find specific numbers because each area is going to be a little bit different. There have been some numbers that the restoration itself had taken $200 million, some will take $100 million, some might be in the billions. So it really is hard to gauge. I would say it would take many, many years. Water pollution is extremely hard to get rid of. And specifically this type of pollution would lead to acid mine drainage, which can cycle back in the water cycle and come down as acid rain. So you can imagine the type of effects that would have. We also talked about some of the carcinogenic elements and the human health. This water does connect to drinking water, so you're right, it would also damage human health. And really to put a number all in that and how many years it would take to restore that level of damage would be hard to say precisely, but you can imagine it would be pretty large.
If I may add something too, Aubrey, what is so controversial about this topic is that they want to use the dry stacking method, which is mainly untested in the US. The current only operational North American mines that use this are located up in Quebec and Alaska, with another proposed mine using the dry stacking method out in Nevada. So it all relates to if these acid tailings do get in our water systems, where will that go? Who will all be affected? Like you said, cancer would result in some cases, and that's just not a risk we're ready to take right now on our grounds.
Evan, what's the risk, given the location relatively close to Canada, that we could have an international issue if the pollution can affect the Canadian waters?
Great question, and thank you. As Justin touched on, in the past, Antofagasta, the parent company, has been linked to having issues in international borders. As you know, contamination did spill over in Argentina, and so it is very likely that the effects of this acid, if it does get in the waterways, it could turn into an international issue. And as you look at those graphs and as you look at those images of Canada and how close it is to us, I mean, one waterway runs the wrong way and it's up into Canada just like that.
And just to add a little bit more to that, pollution doesn't really respect borders. And so with these watersheds, although the mining wouldn't directly be taking place in the boundary waters area, it spills into it. And again, that is linked to Canada. So It was a great question, and I do think that it could cause some international concerns, and Canada has actually expressed concern with the project.
If I may just also ask the question, they were going to recycle the water from the dry stacking method. But how, I mean, that water is going to be highly contaminated.
Mhm.
There's no way to make sure it stays safe, is there? Even if they recycle it through the plant, there's, you know, after 25 years, are they saying that they'll never leak anywhere? That's hard to believe.
That's a great point. So their proposed plan is to put it into this, kind of process it, put it into their recycling plant that will be on site versus putting it in a different watershed near Lake Superior. And we're not quite sure exactly what the water effects will be, that even though they're taking all of the necessary precautions, there is still room for error and there's still room for contamination. So even though the dry stacking method is a more sustainable option opposed to open pit mining, there are still risks involved. And we've seen lead poisoning in the water in similar places. They've tried it in 4 other areas where they have similar climates to Minnesota, and they're seeing lead poisoning in the water.
And that brings me to, now you have lead poisoning in children and the cost of remediation and the damage to the children of Minnesota. We have examples of that across the country and across the world, of lead poisoning of children and how difficult it is to deal with. And the animals. The animals also get lead poisoning, and then people get lead poisoning from eating them.
Absolutely. And our region truly will never be the same should something like lead poisoning happen in the water. And it's just a risk that we are not willing to take, to let this mining company come in and perhaps distort the way that things have been for millions of years in the surviving, striving economies that the vegetation, the water.
Thank you.
And one of the things I wanted to add on to what Maddie was saying too is they're really trying to push that this new dry stacking technique is new and it fits science and it's good, and everything is going to be great. But like was mentioned in the presentation, it's really been tested in a lot of different climates in Minnesota. We do have a damper ground. A lot of us have sub pumps in our basement for a reason. We dig down in basement, so the ground becomes very moist. So it's not as tested or as proven. And one of the concerns is that moisture in the water would cause erosion, which causes further watershed transmission. And so that just wanted to add that in there.
Thank you.
I have more of a comment, a question as well. Clearly the history of the mining industry is not good, and you've pointed that out. Have you looked into the background of the leadership of the parent company to see if that has been purged or whether the new group of people are more environmentally sensitive? And then knowing that this is going before the governor, I would wonder if you've taken the political dimensions into consideration. I mean, what forces are playing upon the governor? What industries are, obviously besides this one, might be pushing for it? Have there been any protests already? What's the political environment that this is being conducted in?
I guess I know, Aubrey, I know you have some really good information on this. I think one of the bigger issues was that when President Obama was president, he had kind of halted this and suspended these permits. And due to the new administration, those permits have been lifted and they have been allowed to continue. Some protesters that are opposed to this plan have been pointing out the relationship between the CEO of Antofagasta and President Trump, saying that may be a conflict, not necessarily a conflict of interest, but maybe why some of this is being allowed to go through. So I'm sure Governor Walz is under pressure from that administration to allow it to go through as far as economics and trading. And, with everything going on with China, our ability to mine copper and nickel and be a #1 producer in the world. And, the way that oil's been going and all of that, just kind of resetting the trade grounds. I think that's a pressure that Governor Walz, you would face, is pushback from the administration in Washington that they had already approved it.
What's Senator Klobuchar's position on this, considering that she could very easily be vice president in the next administration?
So she actually, there were some emails that were leaked about this process that happened during the Obama administration where the mining permits were revoked. And the way that it happened, she was a little unhappy with, since her constituents are a lot of these people in the Iron Range in Minnesota.
Right.
However, she actually, excuse me?
She speaks about that a lot, about her grandpa being a miner in the Iron Range.
Yeah, she does. She actually hasn't, I don't believe, taken a stance on the case either way, and I think part of that is because of her constituency, and another part is the politics of it.
Okay. Tim, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have two. So I'll I'll lay both of them out quickly, and then you can answer one and then the other. The first question is, at some point during the presentation, someone made the statement that the land has rights. That's a controversial statement. It might be correct, but I wonder if someone could give me a little bit more insight into the concept that the land has rights. And then the second question is, it's clear you've been working on this for some time. Obviously, our world has changed over the past 3 months because of the pandemic. Is there anything in your proposal and in your recommendations and in your solution that is different or has been affected by the reality of the pandemic, where it puts us today and how it will affect us for the next few years? You know, someone can argue that with all of the lost job income that has occurred, maybe it has, it's a recalculation of the importance of people earning money right now when they need it, as opposed to your, very compelling presentation about total job revenue over time.
Yeah, that's a great question. To get to the first part about the land having rights, the main reason we pointed that out was because of all of the environmental protection acts that have been passed, and there's even some more proposed that are going to be passed, or that hopefully will be passed. And so those are protecting the lands for future generations, and so because of that, that is why we said the lands have rights. In addition, I mentioned the Ojibwe tribe of Minnesota. They had also been ceded parts of the land to be used for hunting and fishing, and if let's say the lead poisoning had happened, that would highly affect that and really go against the treaty and the land that they were ceded. And so I guess as an extension of the land having rights, the people living on that land and people affected by that land are the primary people who do have the rights.
Do you anticipate litigation from the tribe?
Can you say that again?
Do you anticipate any litigation being brought by the tribe in federal court to protect their rights?
There have been a lot of cases in the past regarding this one treaty of 1854, and basically different companies or people going on the land. And in the end, the Supreme Court has mostly sided with the tribe's land. And so if in the case that there was a lot of pollution affecting this hunting and fishing and the rights of the Ojibwe tribe, I'm sure there would be a lot of litigation. And based on the past, I would think that it would side with the tribe.
Well, doesn't that give us an out as a gubernatorial administration, in that if we allow them to go forward, we know that the minute anything starts up, the tribe is going to advocate very strongly for its rights, and that the courts, at least to this point, at least the district court and the court of appeals for your circuit, are likely to back them up. Doesn't that give us our political out, so to speak?
If I could actually jump in, the courts are right now in a big legal battle pursuing to talking about the leases. So right now the courts have been siding, even siding with the mining company. And so allowing to have the same kind of out by letting the courts kind of decide even with the tribes is a little bit risky, which is why we kind of stayed away from that and tried to take the most action we could immediately.
Okay.
Is there any light between the federal EPA and the state EPA on this? Are they antagonistic? I mean, the federal rights have been, the EPA rights have been weakened considerably under this administration. And I wonder if the state EPA has any position on it. And second question on this point would be, at some point, this is a very valuable resource and very scarce, apparently, in some ways. And so the question becomes, if you were extracting oil, you would ask, what's the break-even point for the cost of extraction versus the sale price? Has there been any analysis of that over time for just not the present time, but future projections? And lastly, if at some point this land must be mined, and you presented this to the company, have they any plans that they think that they could extract this differently at a with lower pollution possibilities? Although I doubt that, but I just asked the question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to answer, Tim, I believe you had a question about the current impact of like the coronavirus and stuff like that. So I want to make sure we answer that question before we jump on to anything else. And I wanted to make sure that kind of our opinion, I guess I wanted to clarify your question was asking, given the times of the coronavirus and everything that's going on in the world, people's lack of immediate income, how does that change our opinion on the boom bust kind of thing? I would say, and if anybody else wants to step in, please do. But from our group, I would say that, you look at 3 months, I think it's hard to, this is a place of history, right? This has been around for thousands of geological years. So to make some sort of short-term impact or some sort of short-term decision based on what's happening now, some of these people are going to move into this town that are not from Minnesota. They're going to be making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to run these things, and then they're going to leave. I think the core mining group of people, they typically belong to unions. They're usually pretty strongly protected. So to make a short-term decision to allow it to happen just because the world's in a different place than it was 3 months ago, I think would be a mistake. I don't think it changes our research. I don't think it changes the outcome of, negative effects that the project could have. But my personal stance was I would keep our recommendation the same.
If I could add on to that, as it relates, I don't know the day-to-day mining numbers up there, especially under what we're going under right now. But I know that the number of direct miners up in the area is just under 6,000 at the moment. Now, of course, personnel that is essential would be able to continue with their operations on the Iron Range. And then direct mining would be impacted, of course, because of the stay-at-home order and what Governor Walz is actually enacting in Minnesota at the moment. But it's just really tough to say. I mean, people aren't able to go up and visit these waters right now. They're not able to go up and visit hotels and provide money to all these industries up there right now. So the region is really hurt at the moment because of the coronavirus.
Maddie, did you have something to answer the other question?
Yes, I believe there was a comment, a third question that was provided just on the methods of mining. And I just wanted to comment briefly on what their current plan is in terms of mining methods. So in July 2019, it was announced that the dry stacking method would be used for this project. So that's pretty recent. That's less than a year that they have announced that this method would be using for this project. And whether, open pit had been used for a long period of time, and whether dry stacking would become enhanced, and I cannot quite say. It's hard to imagine that they would be able to completely use a different method, but these are the two methods that have been at this point considered for the project, and it looks like dry stacking would be the way to go. And this more environmentally sustainable method is what it's being presented at. But I think when you look at the research, you see a lot of contamination and a lot of potential problems with it. So whether or not they will come up with a different kind of project, I think perhaps depends on how long they are within the permitting process and how far that they are able to get.
Has the state EPA weighed in on this?
So the state has a special, the Minnesota DNR has a special obligation to do their own studies, environmental studies. They can't take the same information that Twin Metals conducted themselves. And so they've been kind of waiting. Recently, they've been told to wait by the governor before moving forward in any of their research because of a federal agency has been refusing to give up some of the research that they conducted. So similarly, on a federal level, the EPA has to do their own studies to verify Twin Metals information and research, and they've chosen to not publish any of that information, even though they're legally obligated to. So right now they are in a legal battle with that. So it's hard to say specifically what their comments would be as as the legal battle kind of continues on. Right now, things are a little bit at a standstill until a resolution can be come to.
Well, that would certainly be the basis for the governor to say, I can't make a decision on the permits until this issue is resolved with the EPAs. Is that right?
Yes, so he has told the state agencies to halt the permitting process for right now until the legal battles are done, until they come to a resolution, because they do have the right to have access to those documents, and because they're being withheld right now, they just don't feel comfortable moving forward. The idea, some are presuming that those documents contain reasons to stop the mine and to not let it move forward, and that's why they're being withheld. And that's where the politics kind of play into it, where they're trying to pursue both economic interest as also interest environmentally.
Okay, so I think we should move on to the comments section. And since Tim has to be at a hasty retreat for 2 o'clock, why don't you start, Tim?
Well, first, congratulations, all 5 of you. Nice job. Very impressive. I mean, really. Just to start off, because you know we evaluate you on the ethical, the financial, and the legal, but we also care about the quality of the presentation. So let me say, actually, to start off with a negative, maybe the other judges will help me. I don't know if I remember hearing who I am. I don't know if I remember hearing that I was the governor or something like that.
Yeah,
so
yeah, they did say that to him at the beginning.
Oh.
The governor and the cabinet.
Okay, forgive me. Sorry if I missed that for a second.
They were Tommy Consulting, which I love. It's probably in the University of St. Thomas, loosen up that way. Go ahead.
But several positives in the overall presentation. I love when a team of 5 has great balance, and you really pulled it off. The person with the fewest amount of time was 3 minutes and 15 seconds, and the person with the most was 6. It was really good. All 5 of you spoke at least 3 times in the Q&A, so the balance was fantastic. The pacing was good. You finished a minute and a half early. You only went 23 minutes and 30 seconds, but so, for something this important, you want to use all your time, but that's within 10%, and so it's not bad at all. Just fantastic the way the Q&A really made the presentation better. You introduced new information. You knew information that was important that you didn't have time to deliver in the 25, but you had done the research and you were ready in that way for our questions. So that was very clear to us and was awesome. Thank you for, maybe it was Ted. I was a horrible stakeholder in that I asked 2 questions, and it took effort on your part to make sure that I got my second one about the pandemic answered. So that was very kind and very intuitive, because even though I'm a bad person for asking 2 questions at once, I would have been a worse person if I didn't get the answer. So that was excellent. Using those 4 squares on more than one slide for the ethics was fantastic. It really helped us understand complexity with the way you did that with the different colors. Making the point that this is our final recommendation, it's always helpful for us as listeners because we're filled with so much information. And then that's when you shared your proposed solution. That worked very well for me. When it came to the content, I really was impressed with the manner in which you took character and defined it in the context of trust. And to me, it was the most compelling, well, 2 very compelling parts to the presentation. One was the concept that we won't be able to sue the Chilean company. That was, and then and then you shared their history of corruption. And then secondly was that amazing job loss graph, which showed that yes, there's an initial bump. I mean, those 2 things were fantastic. yeah, so that, I've got more, but that's probably the time that I deserve. So nice job.
Thank you, Tim.
Leon?
Thank you. I thought it was a great job. I'm not as compulsive timing things as Tim. So overall, I thought it was a fantastic job. I had the opportunity to listen to the other team present the same thing. So for me, there was also an opportunity to compare. And you did a great job. You really laid it out very carefully, step by step by step, what's at risk. And I can't remember if you started out by just sort of summarizing and tell us what you were going to say within the first slide or so, but sometimes in a presentation, it's good to say, this is what we're going to tell you, and now here we go. One of the things to think about in doing this at another time is to keep in mind, everyone's talking about the cost of mitigation falling on the state. The mitigation historically across the world, when you look at other mines, lives on and on and on and on. It's not 25 years. It's almost 2, 3, 4 generations. So that's an enormous cost that if somebody's asking about cost, to emphasize. For what it's worth, there was a question about the short term. Don't we need to do this for the short term, which is a reasonable and good question. What occurred to me, for what it's worth, when I thought about that, is the people of Easter Island lived on the short term. There's very little living on Easter Island anymore because of it. Forgetting the long term can be devastating to a society and to its people. And I think you did a phenomenal job, very well laid out. I really don't have a lot I thought you used your slides very well. And I thought you talked and everybody presented and came in at the right time and everybody answered the questions that were appropriate. So very well done. Thank you.
Okay, Sam, your thoughts?
I agree with almost everything that was said. I would have a slightly different emphasis. I mean, I agree that the pollution problems, the economics that you laid out, the charting that you did was all excellent. I also found your level of detail and expertise in this area really impressive as well. I would, in terms of emphasis, what it really comes down to after you look at the economics is really the trustworthiness of the corporation to follow through on its promises, especially in an industry with such a lousy history. And I would have maybe emphasized more the historic raping of the land by these corporations. And particularly the history of this parent company, so that one would know that even if they were able to get the permits, and you'd have to see that in fact that they keep their word, and apparently they don't. So it puts in perspective how iffy the actual analysis is from their end on the environment. I would have also have liked to hear more about the political process that was involved or engaged, so that I could deal with that with the governor and assist in knowing that the difference between the EPAs is important, especially if in this case we now learn that the federal EPA is trying to hide or to postpone revealing the information and refuses to give their income taxes to the country as promised. That was a political joke. I don't think it got passed. But I think the trustworthiness of the analysis of the corporation is worthy of a good deal of emphasis, because it underlies all of the numbers that you see, if you're getting some of your numbers from them. That's it.
So my thoughts are, this team was incredibly well balanced. All of the people in the team were articulate. They knew the subject matter. I particularly liked the way in Q&A, especially because we're virtual here, the way you picked up and developed off of one another's comments. And that's not an easy thing to do live. And it's certainly more difficult to do in this Zoom world of ours. So I was very impressed at how smoothly those transitions were made. I agree with Tim as to the development of the concepts of character and trust. I thought that was absolutely excellent. And looking at the slide that's in front of me now, you put up some slides that are incredibly beautiful in a very ugly time in our country, that are calming. I would love to keep this one as a screensaver because it's just exquisite. And it went to the thesis of, you know, what do we give up if we engage in this mining and destruction of this amazing resource, in terms of its beauty and its endurance over centuries, and that had a tremendous, I think, emotional impact on me throughout your presentation. Whenever you put up the slides of the area itself, I think that was clearly you love your state, and it really came through in your presentation. And you were trying to influence someone who hopefully loves the state too and appreciates its great beauty and its endurance. So congratulations to all of you. You did a lovely job, and we hope that you will be back on your campus in the fall, healthy, and hopefully, since some of you are juniors, that we will see you again. And for the seniors, best of luck as you go forward in your careers or to graduate school. I know it's a terrible time to be graduating, but we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you all.
Okay, so Ravi, can you DC all of us? And there goes the cursor.
Yeah, I will